Single dad tackled a robber in a grocery store. The woman he protected was the CEO behind the brand. Tom Harris never imagined that one split-second decision in aisle 4 would change everything. What started as a Tuesday morning grocery run turned into a fight for survival, a twist of fate, and a second chance at life he never saw coming. Stay with me until the end of this story, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning had started like any other, unremarkable, predictable, safe. Tom Harris stood in his small kitchen, the kind with chipped countertops and a refrigerator that hummed too loud, pouring milk into Sophie's cereal bowl. His daughter sat at the table, legs swinging beneath her chair, her backpack already zipped and waiting by the door. "Dad, we're out of the good cereal," Sophie said, poking at the generic flakes with her spoon. Tom glanced at the clock, 7:15. School started at 8. He had exactly 45 minutes to drop her off, grab something decent for breakfast, and make it to his shift at the warehouse. The math was tight, but doable. "We'll stop at Green Mart on the way," he said, rinsing his coffee mug in the sink. 5-minute stop, in and out. Sophie grinned, the gap where her front tooth used to be making her look even younger than 8. "Can we get the one with the marshmallows?" "We'll see," Tom said, which was dad code for probably not, but I don't want to argue before school. He grabbed his jacket, a faded Marine's hoodie he'd worn thin over the years, and his keys. The morning air was crisp when they stepped outside, the kind of cool that promised a warm afternoon. The neighborhood was quiet, rows of modest homes with chain-link fences and cars that had seen better days. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Sophie climbed into the back seat of his old Chevy pickup, buckling herself in without being asked. Tom caught her eye in the rearview mirror and felt that familiar tug in his chest, the one that reminded him he was doing this alone, and that every decision mattered twice as much because of it. "You excited about the field trip on Friday?" he asked, pulling onto the main road. "Yeah, we're going to the Science Museum. Mrs. Patterson said we get to see real dinosaur bones." "That's awesome, kiddo. Are you going to be able to come?" Tom's jaw tightened. He'd requested the day off 2 weeks ago, but his supervisor had been vague about approving it. The warehouse job paid just enough to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional emergency, but it didn't come with flexibility. "I'm working on it," he said. Sophie didn't push. She'd learned not to. Green Mart appeared on the left, a mid-sized grocery store with a green and white awning and a parking lot that was half full. Tom pulled into a spot near the entrance, killed the engine, and turned to Sophie. "Quick trip, okay? No wandering." "Okay, Dad." The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside, the store smelled like fresh bread and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sterile grocery store glow. A handful of customers moved through the aisles, a woman with a baby in a cart, an older man reading the back of a soup can, a teenager stocking shelves. Tom grabbed a basket and made a beeline for aisle 9. Sophie trotted beside him, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "There," she said, pointing at the brightly colored boxes of cereal on the top shelf. "The one with the unicorn." Tom reached up and grabbed it, tossing it into the basket, along with a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. Simple, efficient, exactly the kind of errand that shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. They headed toward the checkout lanes. Only 2 were open. Tom picked the shorter line, 3 people ahead of them. Sophie leaned against the cart divider, humming a song she'd learned in music class. That's when Tom noticed the woman. She stood 2 lanes over, waiting with a small basket of her own. She was dressed sharply, too sharply for a Tuesday morning grocery run. White blazer, tailored black pants, heels that clicked softly when she shifted her weight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from years of knowing exactly who she was. Tom didn't think much of it. People dressed however they wanted. Maybe she had a meeting after this. Maybe she just liked looking put together. It wasn't his business. The line moved. Tom set the basket on the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young woman with braces and a name tag that read Jenna, started scanning items. "Find everything okay?" Jenna asked, her voice cheerful in that retail-mandated way. "Yeah, thanks," Tom said. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, can I get gum?" "Not today, Soph. But not today. She huffed, but didn't argue further. Tom pulled his wallet from his back pocket, counting the bills inside. $43 until Friday. Enough for gas and maybe one more grocery run if he stretched it. That's when the glass shattered. The sound was so sudden, so violent, that for a moment Tom's brain couldn't process it. It was like the world had split open. Customers screamed. Jenna stumbled backward, knocking over a display of candy bars. Tom's head snapped toward the entrance. A man in a black ski mask stood just inside the doorway, one hand gripping a crowbar, the other holding a semi-automatic pistol. His chest heaved, his movements jittery, like he was running on adrenaline and something else, something chemical. "Everybody down, now!" the man shouted, his voice cracking. "On the ground! Hands where I can see them!" The store erupted into chaos. Shoppers dropped to the floor, some scrambling behind shelves, others freezing in place. The teenager stocking shelves bolted toward the back of the store. The older man near the soup cans pressed himself flat against the tile, hands over his head. Tom's training kicked in before his conscious mind could catch up. He'd been a Marine for 6 years, served 2 tours overseas. Seen things that still woke him up at night, drenched in sweat, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. That part of his life was supposed to be over. He was a dad now, a civilian. But the instincts didn't die. They hibernated. And now they roared awake. Tom's first thought was Sophie. He turned, grabbed her by the shoulders, and pulled her down behind the checkout counter. She was trembling, her eyes wide with terror. "Dad!" "Shh," Tom whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound." "I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know. But you need to stay quiet. Can you do that for me?" Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tom's heart was a war drum in his chest. He peered around the edge of the counter, assessing the situation. The gunman was moving deeper into the store now, waving the pistol at anyone who dared to look up. He was rail-thin, his movements erratic. Addict, Tom thought. Desperate, unpredictable. "Where's the manager?" the man screamed. "I want the manager! Open the safe! Open it now or I start shooting!" Jenna whimpered, her hands shaking as she slowly raised them. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't—" "Shut up," the gunman barked, swinging the pistol toward her. Tom's muscles tensed. Every instinct told him to stay down, to protect Sophie, to wait for the police. But then he saw the woman in the white blazer. She was still standing. Maybe she'd frozen. Maybe she hadn't processed what was happening, but she was upright, visible, and the gunman was looking right at her. "You!" the man said, stalking toward her. "Yeah, you in the fancy clothes. Bet you got money. Hand over your purse. Now." The woman's voice was calm, too calm. "I don't want any trouble." "Then give me the damn purse." She reached for her bag slowly, carefully, like she was trying not to spook a wild animal, but her hands were shaking. The gunman grabbed her by the arm, yanking her forward. The woman gasped, stumbling in her heels. And that's when something inside Tom snapped. He didn't think. Thinking got you killed. He moved. Tom launched himself from behind the counter, his body low, his weight centered. The gunman's back was turned. 3 seconds. That's all Tom had. 2 seconds. 1. Tom's shoulder slammed into the gunman's ribs with the force of a freight train. The 2 men crashed into a shelf stacked with canned goods. Soup cans exploded across the floor, rolling in every direction. The gun flew from the man's hand, skittering across the tile like a deadly top. "Get down!" Tom roared at the woman. She didn't need to be told twice. She dropped to the floor, dragging her purse with her. The gunman thrashed beneath Tom, clawing at his face, his jacket, anything he could reach. Tom pinned him with one knee, grabbing the man's wrists and slamming them against the tile. "Stay down," Tom growled. The man bucked, trying to throw him off, but Tom had 50 pounds on him and years of training. He twisted the man's arm behind his back, pressing his face into the floor. "Someone call 911!" Tom shouted. Jenna was already on the phone, her voice high and breathless. Yes, there's a robbery. Green Mart on 5th. Please hurry." The gunman spat a string of curses, still struggling. Tom pressed harder, his knee digging into the man's spine. "Stop moving or I'll make it hurt worse," Tom said, his voice cold. The man went still. Tom's hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding his system. His knuckles were bleeding. He'd scraped them on the tile during the tackle, but he didn't feel the pain. Not yet. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Tom glanced back toward the checkout counter. Sophie was still there, peeking around the edge, her face pale but unharmed. "You okay, kiddo?" Tom called. Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Good girl, stay there." The woman in the white blazer was sitting up now, her back against a shelf, her breathing ragged. She stared at Tom like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "Are you hurt?" Tom asked. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, I'm fine." "Good. Stay down until the cops get here." The sirens were deafening now. Red and blue lights flashed through the store's front windows. Car doors slammed, boots pounded against pavement. "Police, hands where we can see them." Tom raised one hand, keeping the other pressed against the gunman's back. "He's secured. Guns on the floor to my left." Two officers rushed in, weapons drawn. One of them kicked the pistol away while the other moved toward Tom. "Let him go, sir. We've got him." Tom released his grip and stood, his legs unsteady. The officers hauled the gunman to his feet, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. The man was still cursing, still struggling, but it was over. One of the officers, a stocky man with a graying mustache, turned to Tom. "You the one who took him down?" Tom nodded. "Hell of a thing," the officer said. "You ex-military?" "Marines." "Figures." The officer looked past Tom toward the woman in the white blazer. She was standing now, brushing dust off her pants. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "No," she said, her voice steadier now. "Thanks to him." She walked toward Tom, her heels clicking softly. Up close, Tom could see the fear still lingering in her eyes, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to compose herself. "You saved my life," she said, her voice cracking. I don't even know your name." "Tom Harris." "Charlotte," she said. "Charlotte Wynne." She extended her hand. Tom shook it, his palm rough against her smooth skin. "Just did what anyone would do," Tom said, suddenly aware of the crowd staring at them. "No," Charlotte said firmly. "Not anyone. Most people would have stayed down. You didn't." Tom felt heat rise to his face. He wasn't good with compliments. Never had been. "I need to check on my daughter," he said, pulling his hand away. "Of course," Charlotte said quickly. "Of course. Thank you. Really." Tom nodded and turned back toward the checkout counter. Sophie was already running toward him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. Dad, you were so brave." Tom knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. "You okay, Soph?" "I was scared," she whispered. "I know, me too." "But you stopped him." "Yeah, I did." Sophie pulled back, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Are we still going to school?" Tom laughed, a short, breathless sound. "Yeah, kiddo, we're still going to school." He stood, taking her hand. The store was still buzzing with activity, paramedics checking on customers, officers taking statements, employees trying to make sense of the wreckage. Tom just wanted to leave, to get Sophie somewhere safe, to pretend this morning had never happened, but as he walked toward the exit, he felt Charlotte's eyes on him. He glanced back. She was standing near the shattered entrance, talking to one of the officers, but her gaze was fixed on Tom. There was something in her expression, gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something Tom couldn't quite name. He gave her a small nod, then led Sophie out into the parking lot. The cool morning air hit him like a slap, grounding him. His hands were still shaking. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. His knuckles were bleeding. But Sophie was safe. That was all that mattered. Tom opened the truck door and helped Sophie into the back seat. She was quiet now, staring out the window. "Dad?" she said softly. "Yeah?" "That lady, the one you saved, she seemed really important." Tom started the engine. "Maybe." "Do you think we'll see her again?" Tom glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Sophie's reflection. "I don't know, kiddo. Probably not." He pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Greenmart behind. He had no idea how wrong he was. The rest of that Tuesday passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls Tom didn't want to make. After dropping Sophie at school, 20 minutes late, with a hastily scribbled note explaining the delay, he'd driven straight to the police station to give his official statement. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Martinez with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, had walked him through the incident 3 times, asking him to recall details he hadn't consciously registered. The color of the gunman's shoes, the exact words he'd shouted, whether anyone else had been in the store who might have fled before police arrived. Tom answered as best he could, but his mind kept drifting back to Sophie's face when she'd wrapped her arms around him, the way her voice had trembled when she'd said she was scared. He'd promised himself years ago, after leaving the Marines, that he'd never put her in danger. And yet this morning, she'd been 10 feet away from a loaded weapon. "Mr. Harris?" Tom blinked, refocusing on Detective Martinez. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you'd ever seen the suspect before today." "No, never." Martinez nodded, making a note on her tablet. "The store's security footage confirms your account. Clean takedown. Textbook, actually. You probably saved lives today." Tom shifted in his chair. "I just reacted." "Well, your reaction kept a bad situation from getting worse." She set the tablet down and leaned back, studying him. "You know, we're always looking for people with your kind of training. Ever thought about joining the force?" Tom had heard variations of this question a dozen times since leaving the military. Police departments, private security firms, even a buddy who ran a bail bonds operation. They all saw his resume and assumed he'd want to keep doing what he'd been trained to do. "I've got a daughter," Tom said simply. "Can't risk not coming home." Martinez's expression softened. "Fair enough." She stood, extending her hand. "You're free to go. We'll be in touch if we need anything else, but I don't anticipate that. The suspect's got priors for armed robbery. This is pretty open and shut." Tom shook her hand and left, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight. His truck was parked across the street, looking even more battered in the harsh daylight. He climbed in, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at the warehouse. "Heard about this morning? You okay?" Tom typed back, "Yeah, be there for night shift." The response came immediately. "Take the night off. See you tomorrow." Tom should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt restless. The adrenaline from the morning had worn off, leaving him hollowed out and jittery. He drove to Sophie's school and parked across the street, even though dismissal was still 2 hours away. He just needed to be close to her, to know she was safe behind those brick walls and chain-link fences. His phone rang. Unknown number. Tom almost didn't answer, but something made him hit the green button. "Hello? Mr. Harris?" A woman's voice, professional and polite. "This is Amanda Cho calling from Wynn Foods' corporate office. I'm Ms. Wynn's executive assistant." Tom sat up straighter. "Okay. Ms. Wynn wanted me to reach out personally to thank you again for your actions this morning. She's extremely grateful." "That's not necessary," Tom said. "Really?" She insisted. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "She'd also like to invite you and your daughter to dinner this Friday evening, if you're available. Her treat, of course. She'd like to properly thank you both." Tom frowned. "That's really not—" "She was very clear that she wouldn't take no for an answer," Amanda said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "And between you and me, Mr. Harris, when Ms. Wynn makes up her mind about something, it's easier to just say yes." Tom rubbed his face. He didn't want dinner. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted this whole thing to fade into the background so he could get back to the quiet, unremarkable routine that kept Sophie safe and fed. But something in Amanda's voice told him that declining would take more energy than accepting. "Friday works," he said finally. "Wonderful. I'll text you the details. And Mr. Harris, thank you. What you did today, it matters more than you know." The call ended. Tom stared at his phone, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Friday arrived faster than Tom would have liked. He'd spent the intervening days trying to act normal, making Sophie's lunch, working his shifts at the warehouse, helping her with homework at the kitchen table, but the incident at Green Mart kept creeping back into his thoughts. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, replaying the moment the gun had skittered across the tile. What if it had gone off? What if the gunmen had been faster, stronger, more desperate? "Dad, you're doing it again," Sophie said from across the table. Tom looked up from the math worksheet they were reviewing. "Doing what?" "Staring at nothing. You've been weird all week." "I'm not weird. You are. Ever since the store thing." Tom set down his pencil. Sophie was watching him with those sharp, knowing eyes, the same eyes her mother had. She saw more than most 8-year-olds always had. Growing up without a mom did that to a kid, made them perceptive in ways they shouldn't have to be. "I'm fine, Soph," Tom said. "Just thinking." "About the bad guy?" "A little." Sophie chewed her bottom lip. "Mrs. Patterson says we should talk about scary things when they happen. She says keeping them inside makes them bigger." Tom felt a pang in his chest. When had his daughter gotten so wise? "You're right," he said. We should talk about it. Are you still scared?" Sophie considered this. "Not really. I mean, it was scary when it happened, but you stopped him. So now I just feel, I don't know, kind of proud, I guess." "Proud?" "That you're my dad." She smiled, that gap-toothed grin that could break his heart and put it back together in the same moment. "You're like a superhero." Tom reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm not a superhero, kiddo. I'm just your dad." "Same thing," Sophie said. That night, Tom pulled out the only dress shirt he owned, a blue button-down he'd bought for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago, and tried to remember the last time he'd been to a nice restaurant. Sophie wore her Sunday dress, the yellow one with the white flowers, and insisted on wearing her light-up sneakers even though Tom suggested her nicer shoes. "Miss Wynne won't care about my shoes," Sophie said confidently. "You don't even know Ms. Wynne." "Yeah, but she's nice. I can tell." Tom didn't argue. They climbed into the truck and headed downtown, following the GPS directions Amanda had texted him. The restaurant was called Artisan, one of those places with a name that didn't explain what kind of food they served, and prices that probably didn't appear on the menu. Tom pulled up to the valet stand and hesitated. "You need valet parking, sir?" a young man in a black vest asked, approaching the driver's side window. Tom glanced at his truck. The dented bumper, the rust spot on the door, the check engine light that had been on for 6 months. Yeah, thanks." He helped Sophie out and handed the keys to the valet, who gave the truck a polite smile that didn't quite hide his surprise. Tom straightened his shirt, took Sophie's hand, and walked through the glass doors into a world that felt nothing like his own. The interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, with tables spaced far enough apart that conversations remained private. A piano played somewhere in the background, the melody smooth and unobtrusive. Well-dressed couples sipped wine and murmured over plates of food Tom couldn't identify. A hostess approached, clipboard in hand. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Harris, we're meeting Charlotte Wynne." The hostess's professional smile brightened. "Of course, Ms. Wynne is already here. Right this way." She led them through the dining room to a corner booth near the windows. Charlotte stood as they approached, and Tom felt that same jolt of recognition from the grocery store, the put-together elegance, the sharp intelligence in her eyes. But tonight, she looked different, softer somehow. She wore a simple black dress instead of her usual business attire, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. "Tom," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Thank you so much for coming." "Thanks for inviting us," Tom said, shaking her hand. He gestured to Sophie. "This is my daughter, Sophie." Charlotte knelt down to Sophie's level, her smile genuine. "Hi, Sophie. I've heard you were very brave on Tuesday." Sophie tucked herself against Tom's side, suddenly shy. "I just did what Dad said." "That's still brave," Charlotte said. She straightened and gestured to the booth. "Please sit. Order anything you want. Tonight's on me." They slid into the booth, Tom positioning himself so Sophie was between him and the window. A waiter appeared immediately, reciting specials Tom barely understood, words like reduction and aioli and sous vide. Tom glanced at Sophie, who looked equally lost. "The chicken parmesan is excellent," Charlotte offered. "Very kid-friendly." Sophie perked up. "I like chicken." "Then that's what you should get," Charlotte said. Tom ordered the same, not trusting himself to pronounce half the items on the menu. Charlotte ordered something with lamb and rosemary, along with a bottle of wine for herself and sparkling water for the table. When the waiter left, an awkward silence settled over the table. Tom wasn't good at small talk, never had been. Charlotte seemed to sense this and jumped in. "So, Sophie," she said, "what grade are you in?" "Third," Sophie said, gaining confidence. "I'm 8. "Third grade. That's a good year. What's your favorite subject?" "Science. We're learning about the solar system." "That's wonderful. Do you have a favorite planet?" "Saturn. Because of the rings." Charlotte smiled. "Saturn's a great choice. When I was your age, I loved Jupiter because of the great red spot. It seems so mysterious." Sophie's eyes widened. "Do you like space?" "I do. I actually wanted to be an astronaut when I was younger." "Really? What happened?" Charlotte laughed. "I discovered I got motion sickness very easily. Turns out that's not ideal for space travel." Sophie giggled, and Tom felt something in his chest loosen. Charlotte was good with kids, natural in a way that didn't feel forced or condescending. She asked Sophie about her teachers, her friends, her favorite books, and listened to the answers like they mattered. The food arrived, and for a while they ate in companionable silence. Tom had to admit the chicken parmesan was the best he'd ever tasted. Sophie devoured hers, pausing only to tell Charlotte about the field trip to the science museum she was excited about. "That sounds amazing," Charlotte said. "Are you going with her, Tom?" Tom set down his fork. "I'm trying. Work's been complicated." Charlotte's expression shifted, something sharp and assessing flickering behind her eyes. "Where do you work?" "Warehouse on the east side. Night security." "Do you like it?" Tom shrugged. "It pays the bills." "That's not what I asked." Tom met her gaze. There was no judgment there, just curiosity. "No," he said honestly. "I don't like it. But it's what's available for someone with my background and my schedule." "Your background being military?" "Marines. 6 years." Charlotte nodded slowly. "And you left because—" Tom glanced at Sophie, who was focused on cutting her chicken into precise squares. "Because I became a single dad," he said quietly, "and deployments don't exactly work with custody arrangements." Understanding flickered across Charlotte's face. She didn't ask about Sophie's mother, didn't press for details Tom wasn't ready to share. She just nodded and said, "That must have been a difficult choice." "It was the only choice." The waiter returned to clear their plates and offer dessert. Sophie's eyes lit up when she heard the word chocolate lava cake, and Charlotte ordered one for them to share. When the waiter left, Charlotte leaned back in the booth, studying Tom with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you tackle that man on Tuesday?" Tom frowned. "Because he had a gun." "A lot of people see guns and stay down. It's the smart thing to do. So why didn't you?" Tom was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I spent 6 years being trained to run toward danger instead of away from it. That doesn't just turn off when you come home. And when I saw him grab you—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I couldn't just watch." "Even though you had Sophie with you?" "Especially because I had Sophie with me. What kind of man would I be if I taught her to stand by while someone else got hurt?" Charlotte's expression softened. "You're a rare kind of person, Tom Harris." "I'm really not." "Yes," Charlotte said firmly. "You are." The lava cake arrived, and Sophie dug in with enthusiasm, getting chocolate on her nose within the first bite. Charlotte laughed, and Tom found himself smiling despite the strange weight of the conversation. "I want to tell you something," Charlotte said, her tone shifting to something more serious, "about who I am." Tom wiped Sophie's face with a napkin. "You already told me, Charlotte Wynn." "I did, but I didn't tell you what that means." She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. "Wynn Foods is the parent company of Green Mart and about 40 other grocery chains across the country. I inherited the business from my father 5 years ago." Tom's hand stilled. "You own Green Mart?" "I own the company that owns Green Mart, yes." Tom sat back, processing this. "So when that guy tried to rob your store—" "He had no idea who I was. I was just another customer to him. But the truth is I'd stopped by that morning to do a random inspection. It's something I do a few times a month, show up unannounced, walk the aisles, talk to employees. I like to see my stores the way customers see them." "That's why you were dressed so nice. For the inspection." "Exactly." Charlotte picked up her water glass, turning it slowly in her hands. I've been thinking about Tuesday all week, Tom, about what could have happened if you hadn't been there. That man was high on something. The police confirmed it. He was unstable, unpredictable. And I was the most visible target in that store. You don't have to thank me again, Tom said. Really? I know I don't have to, but I want to. She set the glass down and looked him directly in the eye. And I want to do more than just buy you dinner. Tom felt a warning bell go off in his head. Ms. Wynne, Charlotte, please. Charlotte, I didn't do what I did because I wanted something in return. I know that. But the fact that you don't want anything makes me want to give you something even more. She leaned forward. When was the last time you applied for a job that actually interested you? Tom blinked at the sudden shift in conversation. I don't know. A while. When? Before Sophie was born, probably. Why? Because I looked you up, Tom. After Tuesday, I asked my assistant to pull whatever she could find. Honorable discharge from the Marines, commendations for leadership, advanced training in security operations. You're overqualified for night shifts at a warehouse. Tom's jaw tightened. I appreciate the research, but I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to understand why someone with your skills is working a job that barely pays above minimum wage. Because no one wants to hire a single dad who needs to be home by 7 every morning to make breakfast and drop his kid at school, Tom said, his voice harder than he intended. Because flexible schedules don't exist in careers that actually pay well. Because every interview I've had in the past 3 years ends the same way. We'll call you. And then they never do. The words came out harsher than he'd meant them to, and he immediately regretted it. This woman had invited them to a nice dinner, and here he was unloading his frustrations like she was his therapist. But Charlotte didn't flinch. If anything, she looked more determined. What if I told you I might have a solution, she said. To what? To all of it. The schedule, the pay, the career that actually uses what you're trained to do. Tom shook his head. Charlotte, I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's an opportunity. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the table. This is a job posting that went live this morning. Head of Regional Security Operations for Wynn Foods. It's a new position. We're consolidating security protocols across all our stores in this region. The job involves site assessments, staff training, emergency response planning. Basically, exactly what you did on Tuesday, but formalized and paid properly. Tom glanced at the phone, then back at Charlotte. You can't just offer me a job. Why not? Because I tackled a guy in your store. That doesn't qualify me to run security for an entire region. Your military record qualifies you. Your instincts qualify you. The fact that you kept your head in a crisis and neutralized a threat without anyone getting hurt qualifies you. Charlotte's voice was steady, brooking no argument. I need someone I can trust in this role, Tom. Someone who doesn't just see it as a paycheck. And after Tuesday, I know you're that person. Tom looked down at Sophie, who had chocolate smeared on her cheek and was watching the conversation with wide, curious eyes. What's the catch? He asked quietly. No catch. The position comes with full benefits, health, dental, vision, 401k matching. The salary is competitive and the hours are flexible. You'd work primarily during school hours with the occasional evening meeting, but nothing that would prevent you from being home for Sophie. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. I need to think about it, Tom said. Charlotte nodded. Of course. Think about it over the weekend. But Tom, I want you to really consider this, not as a favor, not as charity, but as a legitimate opportunity that you've earned. The waiter brought the check, which Charlotte signed without even glancing at the total. They walked out together, the cool evening air a relief after the warmth of the restaurant. The valet brought Tom's truck around and Charlotte walked them to it. Thank you for coming tonight, she said. Both of you. Sophie, emboldened by chocolate cake and good conversation, stepped forward and hugged Charlotte around the waist. Charlotte looked surprised for a moment, then wrapped her arms around the little girl, her expression softening in a way Tom hadn't seen before. Thank you for the cake, Sophie said, pulling back. You're very welcome. They climbed into the truck and Tom started the engine. Charlotte knocked on his window. He rolled it down. Think about it, she said again. Please. Tom nodded. I will. He pulled away from the curb, glancing in the rearview mirror. Charlotte stood on the sidewalk, watching them go, her figure growing smaller as they turned the corner. "Dad?" Sophie said. "Yeah? Are you going to take the job?" "I don't know, kiddo." "I think you should." "Why's that?" "Because you always tell me to try new things, even when they're scary." Tom smiled despite himself. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't always listen." That weekend, Tom barely slept. He pulled up the job posting Charlotte had shown him and read it a dozen times. The requirements matched his background almost perfectly. The salary was double what he made at the warehouse, enough to finally fix the truck, to put money into savings, to maybe even think about moving to a better neighborhood. The benefits alone were worth more than he'd seen in years. But doubt gnawed at him. What if he wasn't good enough? What if Charlotte was only offering because she felt obligated? What if he took the job and failed and ended up worse off than before? Monday morning, he dropped Sophie at school and drove to the warehouse to give his 2 weeks' notice. His supervisor, a gruff man named Dale, who'd always been fair if not particularly friendly, took the news with a shrug. "Can't say I'm surprised," Dale said. "You were always overqualified for this gig. Where you headed?" "Corporate security job," Tom said. "Better hours." "Good for you, man. Good luck." Tom left feeling lighter and more terrified than he had in years. That afternoon, he called the number Amanda had given him. "Win Foods, Amanda Cho speaking." "Hi, Amanda. This is Tom Harris." "Tom, how are you?" "I'm good. Listen, I've been thinking about the position Charlotte mentioned. Is the offer still open?" There was a pause, then Amanda's voice came back bright with enthusiasm. "Absolutely. When can you come in for an interview?" "An interview?" Tom frowned. "I thought, Ms. Wynn insists on doing this properly. She doesn't want you to feel like you're being handed anything. She wants you to earn it, same as anyone else would." Tom felt a surge of respect for Charlotte. She wasn't offering charity. She was offering a real chance. "I can do tomorrow," he said. "Late morning?" "Perfect. I'll send you the address. And Tom, don't be nervous. You've got this." Tuesday morning, Tom put on his blue dress shirt for the second time in a week and drove downtown to the Wynn Foods corporate office. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, rising 15 stories above the street. Tom parked in the visitor lot and took the elevator to the 10th floor, where Amanda greeted him with a warm smile. "Right this way, Tom. Ms. Wynn is expecting you." She led him down a hallway lined with photos of grocery stores, farms, and smiling employees. At the end of the hall was a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Charlotte stood behind her desk, talking on the phone. She gestured for Tom to enter, holding up one finger to indicate she'd be just a moment. Tom stepped inside, taking in the space. It was professional but not cold. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with business texts and what looked like family photos. A small sitting area near the windows held 2 chairs and a coffee table. Charlotte ended her call and came around the desk, extending her hand. "Tom, thank you for coming." "Thanks for seeing me." They shook hands and Charlotte gestured to the sitting area. "Let's sit here. This doesn't need to be a formal interrogation." Tom sat, and Charlotte took the chair across from him. She had a folder in her lap, his resume, he realized, along with what looked like his military records. "I've reviewed your background," Charlotte began. "It's impressive. 6 years active duty, 2 tours overseas, training in tactical operations, leadership roles. Why did you leave?" Tom had expected this question. "I became a single father. The military and custody don't mix well." "Sophie's mother?" "Died when Sophie was 2, car accident." Charlotte's expression shifted, sympathy flickering across her face. "I'm so sorry." Tom nodded, the old grief surfacing briefly before he pushed it back down. "It's been 6 years. We're doing okay." "I can see that. Sophie's a wonderful kid." "She is." Charlotte consulted her notes. "Since leaving the military, you've worked primarily in warehouses and overnight security positions, mostly minimum wage or slightly above. Why haven't you pursued security management roles?" "Because they require availability that I don't have. Night shifts, weekends, on-call hours. I can't do that to Sophie." Understood. Charlotte set the folder aside and leaned forward. Let me tell you what this role actually entails. Win Foods operates 43 stores across this region. Right now, each store handles its own security, local contracts with different companies, no standardized protocols, no oversight. It's inefficient and, as we saw last week, potentially dangerous. I want to change that. Tom listened, his interest growing. I want someone who can assess our current security measures, identify weaknesses, develop comprehensive protocols, and train staff across all locations. Someone who can respond to incidents, coordinate with law enforcement, and ensure that what happened last Tuesday never happens again. Or if it does, that we're prepared. That's a big job, Tom said. It is, which is why I need the right person. Someone with tactical training, leadership experience, and the ability to think clearly under pressure. Charlotte met his gaze. Someone like you. What about my schedule? Sophie gets out of school at 3. Most of your work would happen during business hours, site visits, meetings, training sessions. There might be occasional evenings, but we'd work around your schedule. And if an emergency happens, we have other staff who can respond. Tom processed this. It was exactly what he'd been looking for, the kind of role that matched his skills and his needs. But the doubt crept back in. Why me? He asked. You could hire someone with corporate security experience, someone who knows your industry. I could, Charlotte agreed. But they wouldn't have stopped that robbery. They wouldn't have risked themselves to protect a stranger. This job isn't just about writing protocols and conducting audits, Tom. It's about genuinely caring whether people are safe, and you've already proven you do. Tom was quiet, weighing his options. This was the chance he'd been waiting for, a real career, stability for Sophie, a future that didn't involve counting pennies until the next paycheck. When would I start? He asked. Charlotte's face broke into a smile. Is that a yes? It's a yes. Then you start Monday. Welcome to Win Foods, Tom. They shook hands again, and this time Tom felt the weight of the moment, the shift from one life to another, from survival mode to something more. Charlotte walked him to the door, promising that Amanda would send over all the paperwork. Tom, Charlotte said as he was leaving. He turned. Thank you for taking a chance on this. And on me. I think it's the other way around, Tom said. Maybe it's both. Tom left the office feeling like he was walking on air. He called Sophie's school from the parking lot, asking if he could pick her up early. When he arrived, Sophie came running out, confused but excited. What's wrong? She asked, climbing into the truck. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Tom pulled her into a hug. I got the job, Soph. Sophie squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Really? Really. Does that mean we can get the good cereal now? Tom laughed, the sound breaking free from a place deep in his chest. Yeah, kiddo, we can get the good cereal. They drove to Green Mart, the same store where everything had changed a week ago. Tom parked near the entrance and they walked in together. The shattered glass had been replaced, the shelves restocked. It looked like nothing had ever happened, but everything had. Tom grabbed a cart and let Sophie pick whatever cereal she wanted. The one with marshmallows, the one with chocolate, the one shaped like stars. He didn't care about the cost. For the first time in years, he didn't have to. As they walked through the aisles, Tom felt eyes on him. A few employees whispered, nodding in his direction. One of them, the cashier, Jenna, from that morning, waved shyly. You're a hero, Sophie said, noticing the attention. I'm not a hero. I'm just your dad. Same thing, Sophie said again, grinning. They checked out, and as Tom loaded the bags into the truck, his phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. Congratulations. See you Monday. And Tom, thank you again for everything. Tom smiled, pocketing his phone. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Monday arrived with the kind of nervous energy Tom hadn't felt since his first day of boot camp. He'd been up since 5, unable to sleep, running through mental checklists of everything he needed to remember. Sophie had noticed his restlessness at breakfast, watching him pace the kitchen while his coffee grew cold. You're going to do great, Dad, she'd said, spooning cereal into her mouth. Just be yourself. That's what I'm worried about, Tom had muttered, but he'd smiled when he said it. Now he stood in the lobby of the Win Foods building, wearing the one suit he'd bought over the weekend, charcoal gray, off the rack from a department store, but it fit well enough. Amanda had sent him a detailed email outlining his first day. Orientation at 8, meetings with department heads at 9 and 10, lunch with Charlotte at noon, then an afternoon tour of the nearest Green Mart location. The elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, and Amanda was waiting with that same warm smile. "Tom, right on time. How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Tom admitted. Amanda laughed. "That's normal. Come on, let's get you set up." She led him through a maze of hallways to a small office near the back of the building. It wasn't large, just enough room for a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet, but it had a window that looked out over the parking lot, and there was a photo frame on the desk waiting to be filled. "This is yours," Amanda said. "Computer's already set up with your login credentials. HR will come by in about 20 minutes to get your paperwork sorted. Any questions?" Tom looked around the space, still not quite believing it was real. "No, thank you." "Don't thank me. You earned this." Amanda checked her watch. "I'll come get you when it's time for your first meeting. In the meantime, make yourself comfortable." She left, closing the door behind her. Tom stood in the center of the office, taking it in. His own space. His own desk. A job where people called him by his name instead of just the night guy. He sat down, the chair creaking slightly under his weight, and logged into the computer. His inbox was already full. Welcome messages from various departments, training modules to complete, security reports from the past 6 months flagged for his review. Tom opened the first report and started reading, his military training kicking in as he analyzed incident patterns and response times. 20 minutes passed in what felt like 5. A knock on the door pulled him from the data. "Come in." A woman in her 50s entered, carrying a stack of folders. "Tom Harris, I'm Patricia from HR. Ready to make this official?" The paperwork took longer than expected. Tax forms, direct deposit authorizations, benefits elections, emergency contacts. Patricia walked him through each document with practiced efficiency, explaining insurance options and retirement contributions in terms that actually made sense. When they reached the emergency contacts section, Tom hesitated. "Just put Sophie's school," he said. "And my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She watches Sophie sometimes." Patricia didn't ask about other family, about a partner or parents or siblings. She just wrote down the information and moved on, and Tom was grateful for her discretion. By the time they finished, it was 8:55. Amanda appeared at his door exactly on schedule. "Ready for the fun part?" she asked. Tom followed her to a conference room where 3 people waited around a table. Amanda made introductions. David Chen, VP of Operations, a man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and a firm handshake. Lisa Martinez, Regional Manager for the Eastern Stores, a woman about Tom's age with sharp eyes and a business-like demeanor. And Robert Hayes, Head of Legal, older, gray-haired, with the cautious expression of someone who'd seen too many lawsuits. They spent the next hour walking Tom through the current state of security across the region. Each store contracted with local companies, as Charlotte had mentioned, resulting in wildly inconsistent protocols. Some locations had armed guards, others just cameras. Response times varied from minutes to hours. Training was minimal or non-existent. "It's a mess," David said bluntly, "and it's been a mess for years. We just haven't had the resources to fix it." "Until now," Lisa added, looking at Tom, "Charlotte's been pushing for a unified security division for 2 years. What happened last Tuesday finally gave her the leverage to make it happen." Tom absorbed this, understanding dawning. The robbery hadn't just saved Charlotte's life. It had provided the catalyst for institutional change. "What's my budget?" Tom asked. Robert slid a folder across the table. "Initial allocation is here. It's generous, but not unlimited. Charlotte wants results, but she wants them done smartly." And Tom opened the folder and scanned the numbers. It was more than generous, it was transformative. With this kind of funding, he could implement real changes. "What about resistance?" Tom asked. "Store managers who don't want to change systems they're used to?" Lisa smiled grimly. "That's where I come in. I'll handle the politics, you handle the security. Between us, we'll get it done." The meeting ended with action items and timelines. Tom's head was spinning with information, but he felt energized rather than overwhelmed. This was real work, important work, the kind that actually mattered. At noon, Amanda escorted him to Charlotte's office. Charlotte was on the phone again, But she waved him in, pointing to the sitting area where lunch had been set up. Sandwiches, salads, fruit, bottled water. I understand, but that timeline isn't realistic, Charlotte was saying into the phone, her tone firm but not unkind. We need at least 6 weeks for proper implementation. Yes, I know what the board wants. Then the board needs to trust the people they hired to do this right. She ended the call and turned to Tom with an apologetic smile. Sorry, crisis of the day. How's your morning been? Overwhelming in the best way, Tom said. They sat, and Charlotte handed him a sandwich. David and Lisa can be intense, but they're good at what they do. If they seem skeptical, don't take it personally. They're just protective of their territories. They didn't seem skeptical, more like cautiously optimistic. That's better than I expected. Charlotte unwrapped her own sandwich. What are your first impressions? Tom considered this. The security situation is worse than I thought. No standardization, no accountability, no clear chain of command when something goes wrong. But it's fixable. I just need time and cooperation. You'll have both. What do you need from me? Authority to make changes. When I recommend a new protocol or a different vendor, I need to know you'll back me up. Charlotte met his gaze. You have it. I hired you because I trust your judgment. Don't make me regret it. I won't. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, then Charlotte said, How's Sophie handling the transition? She's excited, doesn't fully understand what it means yet, but she knows things are changing for the better. She's a sweet kid. You've done a good job with her. Tom felt that familiar tightness in his chest. I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. Single parenting always is, Charlotte said quietly. Something in her tone made Tom look up. You have kids? No, but I watched my mother raise me and my brother alone after my father died. I know what it costs. Tom hadn't known Charlotte had lost her father. He'd assumed she'd inherited the company in the usual way, planned succession, careful transition. But there was grief in her voice, old but still present. How old were you? Tom asked. 16. Car accident, same as Sophie's mother. He was driving home from a store opening, hit by a drunk driver on the highway. Charlotte's expression was distant. One phone call and everything changed. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but it shaped who I became, made me understand that every employee in this company has a life outside these walls. Families depending on them, kids who need them to come home safe. She looked at Tom. That's why this security position matters so much to me. It's not just about protecting assets or minimizing liability. It's about making sure people like you, like my father, get to go home at the end of the day. Tom understood then why Charlotte had been so insistent about hiring him. This wasn't about gratitude or obligation. It was personal. I'll do everything I can to make that happen, Tom said. I know you will. They finished lunch, and Charlotte walked him down to the parking lot where Lisa was waiting to drive him to the first store tour. The afternoon passed in a blur of locations and introductions. Lisa took him to 3 different Green Mart stores, each with its own quirks and challenges. At the first, the security cameras hadn't worked in 6 months. At the second, the contracted guard spent most of his shift on his phone. At the third, there were no panic buttons for employees, no emergency protocols, no clear evacuation routes. Tom took notes on everything, his mind already formulating solutions. By the time Lisa dropped him back at the office at 4:30, he had filled an entire notebook with observations and recommendations. He drove to Sophie's school, arriving just as the after-school program was ending. Sophie ran out with her backpack bouncing, her face bright with curiosity. How was it? She demanded before she'd even climbed into the truck. Long, good, a lot to learn. Did you see Ms. Charlotte? I had lunch with her. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? What did you eat? Sandwiches. Boring, Tom laughed. What about you? How was school? We started our space unit today. Mrs. Patterson brought in a model of the solar system and everything. Sophie launched into an enthusiastic description of planetary orbits and asteroid belts, and Tom listened, grateful for the normalcy after a day of so much change. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Tom sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, reviewing the security reports he'd been sent. Incident logs from the past year painted a troubling picture. Shoplifting was constant, employee theft not uncommon, and there had been 3 armed robberies in the region in the past 6 months. The one at his Green Mart had just been the most recent. Tom created a spreadsheet categorizing incidents by type and location, looking for patterns. Certain stores were hit repeatedly. Others had gone years without major problems. The difference, he realized, wasn't location or demographics. It was management. Stores with engaged, trained staff had fewer incidents. Stores where employees felt like interchangeable parts had more. He made a note. Security isn't just cameras and guards. It's culture. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Tom spent his days visiting stores, meeting with managers, assessing vulnerabilities. He developed checklists and protocols, wrote training manuals in clear, practical language, and began vetting security companies for a new regional contract. He worked closely with Lisa, who proved to be as competent as she was demanding, and with David, who had an encyclopedic knowledge of operations logistics. Charlotte checked in regularly, sometimes in scheduled meetings, sometimes in quick emails, occasionally in person when she was visiting stores. She never micromanaged, but she was always aware of his progress, offering support when he needed it, and space when he didn't. Sophie adjusted to their new routine with the resilience of children. She liked that Tom was home for dinner every night now, that he could help with homework without fighting exhaustion, that weekends felt less like survival and more like actual family time. They went to the Science Museum for her field trip, and Tom was there in the front row, taking pictures while Sophie explained the difference between asteroids and comets to anyone who would listen. One evening in late October, about 6 weeks into his new job, Tom was working late at the office, finalizing a contract proposal, when Charlotte knocked on his door. "Burning the midnight oil?" she asked. Tom glanced at the clock. 7:15. "Sorry, I didn't realize how late it was. Sophie's at Mrs. Chen's. I should go get her." "Before you do, can I steal 5 minutes?" "Of course." Charlotte sat in the chair across from his desk, and Tom noticed she looked tired. Not physically, she was as polished as ever, but there was a weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I just came from a board meeting," she said. "They wanted an update on the security overhaul." Tom felt his stomach tighten. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected, thanks to you. Your incident reports show a 20% reduction in theft across the region since you implemented the new protocols. Response times are down. Employee satisfaction is up. Apparently, people feel safer at work when they know someone actually cares about their safety." Tom relaxed slightly. "That's good. It's better than good. It's exactly what I needed to justify the budget expansion." Charlotte leaned forward. "I want to roll this out company-wide, Tom. All 200 stores, not just this region. And I want you to lead it." Tom blinked. "Company-wide?" "You'd get a team, at least 4 regional managers working under you. More resources, bigger budget, real authority to make systemic changes, and a significant raise, obviously." It was everything Tom could have hoped for, the kind of career advancement that usually took years. But it also meant more responsibility, more travel, more time away from Sophie. "Can I think about it?" Tom asked. Charlotte looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Of course. Take as long as you need. But Tom, you've earned this. Don't let doubt talk you out of something you deserve." After she left, Tom sat in his office, staring at the dark window. The reflection looking back at him was a stranger, someone successful, someone valued, someone with a future that extended beyond the next paycheck. He wasn't sure he recognized that person yet. He picked up his phone and called Mrs. Chen. "Hi, Mrs. Chen. I'm so sorry I'm running late. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "No rush, Tom. Sophie and I are making dumplings. Take your time." When Tom arrived at Mrs. Chen's small apartment, he found Sophie at the kitchen table, carefully folding dough around filling, her tongue stuck out in concentration. Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman in her 70s who'd emigrated from Taiwan 50 years ago, supervised with gentle corrections. "Not too much filling or it will burst," Mrs. Chen was saying. "There, like that. Perfect." Sophie looked up when Tom entered. "Dad, look, I made 6 dumplings." "They're beautiful, Soph," Mrs. Chen waved him to a chair. "Sit, sit. You're just in time for dinner." Tom started to protest. He'd already imposed enough, but Mrs. Chen was already filling a bowl with steaming dumplings and setting it in front of him. The first bite transported him somewhere else entirely, the flavors complex and comforting. "Mrs. Chen, these are incredible." Old family recipe, she said, pleased. My mother taught me, I teach Sophie. This is how traditions survive. They ate together, Sophie chattering about her day while Mrs. Chen listened with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed children's company. Tom felt the tension from the office slowly drain away. After dinner, Tom helped clean up while Sophie carefully packed the leftover dumplings into containers. Mrs. Chen, Tom said quietly while Sophie was distracted, can I ask you something? Of course. If you had a chance to do something really big for your career, but it meant being away from your kid more, not all the time, just more than now, would you do it? Mrs. Chen dried a plate thoughtfully. Is this hypothetical? Not entirely. Then my answer is this. Children need many things from their parents. Food, shelter, safety, these are important. But they also need to see their parents happy, fulfilled, growing. If you're miserable to give Sophie stability, she will feel that misery. But if you are thriving, even if it means some change, she will thrive too. Oh, what if I'm not around as much? Then you make the time you have count more. Quality over quantity, as they say. Mrs. Chen set down the plate and looked at him directly. Tom, I watch you with Sophie. You are a good father. Trust yourself to keep being a good father, even as things change. Tom nodded, something settling in his chest. Thank you. No thanks needed. Now go, take your dumplings before they get cold. That weekend, Tom took Sophie to the park. Their park, the one they'd been going to since she was 3. They walked the familiar paths, fed the ducks at the pond, shared a pretzel from the cart near the playground. Sophie ran ahead to the swings, and Tom pushed her, the rhythm meditative and familiar. Higher, Dad! He pushed harder, watching her arc toward the sky, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Sophie, he called, can I ask you something? What? She shouted back, wind in her hair. How would you feel if my job changed, if I had to travel sometime, stay overnight in other cities? Sophie dragged her feet to slow the swing, then turned to look at him. How much? Maybe once or twice a month. Just for a night or two. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important questions. Would Mrs. Chen stay with me? If she's available. Or maybe we could find someone else you like. And you'd still be home most of the time? Every night I could be. Sophie hopped off the swing and walked over to him. Then I think you should do it. Tom knelt down to her level. Why? Because you love your job, I can tell. You smile more now, and you don't get that worried look you used to get when you were checking the mail. Tom hadn't realized she'd noticed. Kids saw everything. I do love my job, he admitted, but I love you more. I know, that's why it's okay. Sophie hugged him, her small arms strung around his neck. Plus, if you travel, you can bring me back those little soaps from the hotel. Tom laughed, the sound breaking free from somewhere deep. Deal. Monday morning, he walked into Charlotte's office without an appointment. She looked up from her computer, surprised. Tom, everything okay? I thought about your offer, he said. I'm in. Charlotte's face broke into a smile. Yeah? Yeah. On one condition. Name it. I need travel to be scheduled at least 2 weeks in advance when possible, and I need guaranteed backup so I'm never stuck overnight unexpectedly. Sophie comes first, always. Done, Charlotte said without hesitation. Anything else? That's it. Charlotte stood and extended her hand. Then welcome to the executive team, Tom. Let's change the whole damn company. They shook on it, and Tom felt the weight of the moment. Another shift. Another leap into something unknown but promising. The announcement went out that afternoon. Tom was promoted to Vice President of Security Operations, effective immediately. His phone started buzzing with congratulatory messages from colleagues he'd worked with over the past weeks. David sent a brief but warm email. Lisa called him directly. About damn time, she said. This company needs people who actually know what they're doing in leadership. Welcome to the club. But the message that meant the most came from Amanda. Charlotte told me the news. She made the right choice. Congratulations, Tom. Your daughter must be so proud. That evening, Tom picked up Sophie from school and drove her straight to the ice cream shop, the fancy one downtown that served sundaes in bowls the size of her head. What's the occasion? Sophie asked, eyes wide as she surveyed the menu. I got a promotion. What's a promotion? It means my boss thinks I'm doing a good job, so she's giving me more responsibility and more money. Sophie gasped. Does that mean we can get the apartment with the balcony? Tom had shown her a listing once, months ago, for a 2-bedroom with a small balcony overlooking a park. It had been completely out of their price range, so far outside the realm of possibility that Tom had closed the website and tried to forget about it. Maybe, he said. Let's see. Sophie ordered the chocolate explosion sundae. Tom got vanilla with caramel. They sat at a small table by the window, and Sophie told him about a book she was reading in class while chocolate ice cream dripped down her chin. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Tom pulled up that listing again. It was still available. With his new salary, it was no longer impossible. It was just on the edge of feasible. He could make it work if he was careful, if he budgeted properly, if he didn't let himself get comfortable and complacent. He filled out the application before he could talk himself out of it. 3 days later, the landlord called. They wanted to meet him, see his employment verification, check his references. Tom took a long lunch, drove to the building, and walked through the apartment with the landlord, a middle-aged woman named Teresa who asked about Sophie and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. Single dad? Teresa asked. Yes, ma'am. Good for you. That's not easy. She gestured around the living room. This is a quiet building, families mostly, a few retirees. We have a community garden in back if Sophie likes that sort of thing. She would, Tom said, picturing Sophie planting tomatoes or sunflowers. Then it's yours if you want it. First month and security deposit, move-in date flexible. Tom signed the lease that afternoon, still not quite believing it was real. When he picked up Sophie from school, he drove past the building and pulled over. See that window on the 3rd floor? He said, pointing. The one with the balcony? Sophie followed his finger. Yeah? That's ours now. We're moving in next month. Sophie's shriek of joy was so loud that Tom worried it might shatter the windows. She unbuckled and launched herself at him, hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. Really? For real? For real, kiddo. Can I paint my room? Any color you want. Sophie pulled back, her face serious. This is because of the job, right? Because Ms. Charlotte gave you the job? Yeah, it is. Then we should thank her. Tom smiled. Yeah, we should. That weekend, Sophie insisted on making Charlotte a thank you card. She spent hours at the kitchen table, drawing pictures of grocery stores and stick figures and stars, writing thank you for helping my dad in careful, uneven letters. Tom watched her work, marveling at her thoughtfulness, her ability to understand that someone had changed their lives and deserved recognition for it. On Monday, Tom brought the card to the office. Charlotte was in a meeting, so he left it on her desk with a brief note. From Sophie. She wanted you to know she's grateful. An hour later, Charlotte appeared at his office door, the card in her hand, her eyes suspiciously bright. This is the sweetest thing anyone's ever given me, she said. She worked hard on it. I can tell. Charlotte studied the drawing. Sophie had drawn 3 figures, one tall and one small, holding hands, and one standing nearby with a smile. Is this me? She's got you smiling. Apparently that's your defining characteristic. But throughout the day, he found himself thinking about that moment of vulnerability, the way Charlotte had held Sophie's card like it was something precious. She was lonely, he realized. Successful, powerful, respected, but lonely. And maybe, just maybe, she'd hired him for reasons that went beyond security protocols and corporate strategy. Maybe she'd seen in him and Sophie something she was missing in her own life. Tom filed that observation away, not sure what to do with it, but knowing it mattered. The weeks blurred together in a haze of productivity. Tom assembled his team, 4 strong regional managers including Lisa, who accepted the promotion with characteristic efficiency. They divided the country into territories, developed training schedules, and began the slow process of transforming 200 independent stores into a unified, secure operation. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Tom traveled to Seattle, to Phoenix, to Boston, staying in hotels that gave him those little soaps Sophie loved, eating meals in airport restaurants, conducting meetings in conference rooms that all looked the same. But every trip ended with him coming home to Sophie, who who would run to him with stories about school and Mrs. Chen and the new apartment they were slowly settling into. The apartment had transformed their lives in ways Tom hadn't anticipated. Having space meant Sophie could have friends over. Having a balcony meant they could eat breakfast outside on sunny mornings. Having a community garden meant Sophie was learning to grow things, coming home with dirt under her fingernails and pride in her voice. They were thriving, and somewhere in the midst of all that change, Tom realized he was too. The anxiety that had dogged him for years, the constant worry about money, about whether he was doing enough, about what would happen if the truck broke down or Sophie got sick or he lost his job, had faded to background noise. He still worried because that's what parents did, but it was manageable now. Contained. Charlotte noticed. She said as much during one of their weekly check-ins in early December. "You look different," she said, studying him across her desk. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore." Tom considered this. "I guess I'm not. Or at least the world feels less heavy." "Good. You deserve that." They talked business for a while, rollout timelines, budget adjustments, a minor incident at a store in Atlanta that Tom had already handled. But as the meeting wound down, Charlotte said, "Are you and Sophie doing anything for Christmas?" Tom shrugged. "Probably just us. We usually keep it low-key." "Would you be interested in not keeping it low-key this year?" Tom looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I host a holiday party every year for the executive team and their families. Nothing fancy, just dinner and games and general festive chaos. I'd like you and Sophie to come." Tom hesitated. Office parties had never been his thing, and dragging Sophie to a work event felt awkward. But something in Charlotte's expression stopped him from declining outright. "Will there be other kids there?" he asked. "At least a dozen. David's got 3, Lisa's got 2, Robert brings his grandkids. It's actually more of a children's party that adults happen to attend." "Then yeah, we'll come." Charlotte smiled, and Tom noticed how that smile changed her whole face, softening the sharp edges that came with running a corporation. "Good," she said. "I'm glad." The week before Charlotte's holiday party, Tom found himself in an unfamiliar position, shopping for something to wear that wasn't work clothes or his worn Marines hoodie. Sophie had declared his usual wardrobe too boring for a fancy party, and somehow he'd let her drag him to the mall on a Saturday afternoon. "What about this one?" Sophie held up a sweater with a reindeer on it, complete with a blinking red nose. "Absolutely not. But it's festive. It's a nightmare." Tom steered her toward a more reasonable section. "How about something that doesn't require batteries?" They compromised on a dark green sweater that Sophie deemed Christmassy enough, and a new dress for her, red velvet with a white collar that made her look older than 8. Tom paid without wincing at the total, another small miracle of their new life. On the drive home, Sophie was quiet, staring out the window at the holiday lights that had started appearing on houses throughout the neighborhood. "Dad?" she said finally. "Yeah?" "Is Ms. Charlotte married?" The question came out of nowhere, and Tom nearly missed the turn. "What? No. Why?" "Just wondering. She's really pretty and nice. Seems like someone would want to marry her." Tom navigated the truck into their parking space, buying time to formulate an answer. "Being married isn't something everyone wants, Soph, and Ms. Charlotte's probably busy running her company. Too busy for a family? I don't know. That's her business, not ours." Sophie unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't move to get out. "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They'd had versions of this conversation before, usually prompted by something Sophie saw at school, a friend's parent getting remarried, a classmate talking about stepmoms or stepdads. Each time, Tom had deflected gently, not ready to confront the question himself. "Maybe someday," he said carefully. "But right now, I'm pretty happy with how things are. Just you and me." "Me too," Sophie said quickly. "I'm not saying I want you to get married. I was just curious." But Tom caught something in her voice, a wistfulness that made him wonder what she wasn't saying. Did she want a mother figure? Was she lonely for that kind of relationship? Or was this just idle 8-year-old curiosity with no deeper meaning? He filed it away to think about later, when he wasn't so tired. The night of the party, Tom spent 20 minutes trying to tame his hair into something presentable before giving up. Sophie emerged from her room in the red dress, her hair pulled back with clips that Mrs. Chen had helped her arrange that afternoon. "You look beautiful, kiddo," Tom said. "You look handsome," Sophie replied, straightening his collar with the seriousness of a fashion consultant. They drove to Charlotte's house, not an apartment or condo as Tom had vaguely expected, but an actual house in one of the nicer suburbs north of the city. It was large but not ostentatious, a craftsman-style home with a wide porch and warm light spilling from the windows. Cars lined the street, and Tom could hear laughter and music as they approached the front door. Sophie grabbed his hand, suddenly nervous. "There's going to be a lot of people." "You'll be fine. Remember, lots of other kids." Charlotte answered the door herself, wearing a deep blue dress that was elegant without being formal. Her hair was down, softer than the sleek ponytail she wore at the office, and she was smiling in a way Tom had rarely seen, open, relaxed, genuinely happy. "Tom! Sophie! Come in! Come in!" She ushered them inside, taking their coats. "Sophie, that dress is stunning. You're going to make all the other kids jealous." Sophie beamed, her nervousness evaporating. "Thank you, Ms. Charlotte." "Just Charlotte tonight. No Ms. at parties." She turned to Tom. "Drinks are in the kitchen, food's everywhere. Kids are currently engaged in what I believe is an epic snowball fight in the backyard, despite the lack of actual snow. Make yourselves at home." The house was warm and inviting, decorated with tasteful holiday touches. A real tree in the corner, garland along the mantel, candles on every surface. Tom recognized several colleagues mingling in the living room. David was deep in conversation with someone Tom didn't know. Lisa was refereeing what looked like a heated debate between two of her kids about video games. "Dad, can I go outside?" Sophie asked, spotting the children through the back window. "Sure. Stay where I can see you." Sophie took off, and Tom found himself standing awkwardly in the entryway, not quite sure how to navigate a social situation that wasn't about work or parenting. Charlotte appeared at his elbow with a glass of something amber. "You look like you could use this," she said. Tom took it, sniffed it. "Whiskey. Good whiskey." "Thanks. Come on, I'll introduce you around. Most people here know who you are, but names help." She guided him through the room, making introductions that Tom immediately forgot, until they reached a corner where a man about Tom's age stood alone, watching the chaos with an amused expression. "Tom, this is my brother Michael. Michael, this is Tom Harris, our new VP of Security." Michael extended his hand, his grip firm. "The grocery store hero. Charlotte's told me all about you." "Has she?" Tom shot Charlotte a look. Charlotte had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have mentioned you once or twice." "More like a dozen times," Michael said with a grin. "Apparently you're single-handedly transforming corporate security standards across the industry." "I'm just doing my job." "That's what all the good ones say." Michael sipped his drink. "What branch were you?" "Marines. You?" "Army. 2 tours in Afghanistan before I smartened up and became a boring civilian." He gestured around the room. "Charlotte guilt trips me into coming to these things every year. I live in Denver now, only come back for holidays." They talked for a while about military life, the adjustment to civilian work, the strange disconnect of going from combat zones to corporate meetings. Michael was easy to talk to, with none of the pretension Tom sometimes encountered in Charlotte's world. He worked as an EMT, he explained, because sitting behind a desk made him want to crawl out of his skin. "Charlotte doesn't get it," Michael said. "She's wired for this kind of life, the strategy, the politics, the long game. Me, I need to know I helped someone today, right now, tangibly. We're built different." Tom glanced across the room where Charlotte was laughing with a group of employees, completely in her element. "She's good at what she does." "She is. But it's lonely at the top, you know? Dad used to say that. Charlotte saw him work himself into an early grave, and now she's doing the same thing." Michael's expression turned serious. "She needs people in her life who aren't employees or board members, friends, real ones." Tom wondered why Michael was telling him this, what subtext he was supposed to be picking up. Before he could ask, Sophie appeared at his side, cheeks flushed from running. "Dad, there's a game room downstairs with a pool table and everything. Can I go play?" "Sure, be careful." She darted off, and Michael smiled. "Cute kid." "How old?" 8 going on 20. "They grow up fast." Michael drained his glass. I should make the rounds. Good talking to you, Tom. Don't be a stranger. Charlotte needs more people around who aren't afraid to tell her when she's being ridiculous. He walked away, leaving Tom to process that strange conversation. Was Michael trying to tell him something about Charlotte, or just making small talk? The evening progressed in a pleasant blur. Tom found himself in surprisingly comfortable conversations with people he'd only known in professional contexts. David turned out to be a passionate home brewer who spent 20 minutes describing his latest IPA experiment. Lisa's husband was a high school teacher with strong opinions about education reform. Robert, the legal head Tom had always found intimidating, showed him pictures of his grandchildren and waxed poetic about retirement plans. Dinner was a buffet-style feast: ham, turkey, sides that kept appearing from the kitchen, desserts that covered an entire table. Tom filled a plate and found a spot near the window where he could keep an eye on Sophie, who was now engaged in an intense board game with 3 other kids. Charlotte materialized beside him with her own plate. "Mind if I join you?" "It's your house." "True, but I'm trying to be polite." She sat, and they ate in comfortable silence for a moment. "So, what do you think? Too overwhelming?" "It's nice, really nice. I haven't been to something like this in, I can't remember how long." "You should come to things more often. You're part of the leadership team now. That comes with social obligations, I'm afraid." "I'm not great at social obligations." Charlotte laughed. "Could have fooled me. You've been working the room like a natural." "That's just survival instinct. Small talk is harder than combat sometimes." "I believe that." Charlotte pushed food around her plate. "Can I ask you something personal?" Tom tensed slightly. "Okay." "What made you decide to stay after Sophie's mother died? To leave the military and become a single dad instead of, I don't know, finding family to help or considering other options?" Tom set down his fork, the question hitting deeper than Charlotte probably intended. "Because she was mine, my responsibility, my daughter, my job to raise. And because I loved her more than I loved the Corps, which was something I didn't think was possible until it happened." "You ever regret it? The choice? Never. The circumstances that forced it? Every day." Tom looked at Sophie across the room, her face bright with concentration as she moved a game piece. "She's the best thing I ever did. Even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, she's worth everything I gave up." Charlotte was quiet, and when Tom looked at her, he saw something raw in her expression, longing, maybe, or grief for paths not taken. "I wanted kids," Charlotte said softly. "When I was younger, I had this whole plan. Build the career first, find the right partner, then start a family by 35. Very organized, very controlled." She smiled without humor. "Then Dad died and I inherited the company at 24. Suddenly I was responsible for thousands of employees and their families, and my own plans just evaporated. I kept thinking I'd have time later, but later never came." "It's not too late," Tom offered. "I'm 42, single, married to a corporation that demands everything I have. It feels pretty late." She shook her head. "Sorry, this is heavy conversation for a party. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because I understand what it means to choose one life and lose another in the process." Charlotte met his eyes, and something passed between them: recognition, understanding, a shared acknowledgement of roads not traveled and prices paid. For a moment, Tom felt like he was seeing the real Charlotte, not the CEO or the boss or the polished executive, but the woman underneath all those roles who was just as uncertain and human as anyone else. "Charlotte!" Amanda appeared, slightly breathless. "Sorry to interrupt, but David needs you. Something about next quarter's projections." Charlotte sighed, the vulnerable moment closing like a door. "Work never stops, even at parties." She stood, touching Tom's shoulder briefly. "Thank you for coming tonight. It means a lot." She disappeared into the crowd, and Tom was left alone with his thoughts and his half-eaten plate of food. Michael's words echoed in his head. She needs people in her life who aren't employees or board members. But what was Tom supposed to do with that information? He worked for Charlotte. She'd given him everything: the job, the career, the stability that had transformed his and Sophie's lives. Getting involved beyond that, even as a friend, felt complicated in ways Tom wasn't equipped to navigate. The party wound down around 9. Kids started getting cranky, parents made noises about bedtimes and early mornings. Tom found Sophie in the game room, teaching two younger kids how to play pool with adorable seriousness. "Time to go, Soph." "Already?" She looked disappointed but didn't argue, saying goodbye to her new friends with promises to maybe see you next time. They found Charlotte in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher despite several offers of help from lingering guests. "Thank you for having us," Tom said. "Sophie had a great time." "It was the best party ever," Sophie declared. "Even better than Amy's birthday party at the roller rink." Charlotte smiled, kneeling down to Sophie's level. "I'm so glad you came. You know what? Next time I need someone to help me plan a party, I'm hiring you as my consultant." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? You clearly know what makes a party successful." They said their goodbyes, collecting coats and heading out into the cold December night. The drive home was quiet, Sophie dozing in the back seat, Tom replaying moments from the evening. He thought about Charlotte's admission, about the loneliness Michael had mentioned, about how success could sometimes mean sacrificing the very things that made life worth living. When they got home, Tom carried Sophie inside. She'd fallen fully asleep in the truck and tucked her into bed, still wearing the red dress. He'd let her change in the morning. Tonight, she looked peaceful and happy, and that was enough. Tom made himself a cup of tea and stood on the balcony looking out over the park. Christmas lights twinkled in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked. The city hummed with its endless rhythm. His phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. "Thank you again for coming. You and Sophie brought something special to the evening. Sleep well." Tom stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Thank you for including us. Merry Christmas, Charlotte?" The response came almost immediately. "Merry Christmas, Tom." He pocketed his phone and finished his tea, wondering what exactly was happening between them and whether he should be concerned about it. But the night was too peaceful to overthink, so he went inside, checked on Sophie one more time, and went to bed. The days leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind of final preparations. Tom made sure all the stores were covered for the holiday, double-checking that security teams were in place and emergency protocols were clear. The last thing anyone needed was an incident on Christmas Eve because someone hadn't done their job properly. On Christmas Eve, Tom and Sophie followed their usual tradition: Chinese takeout, Christmas movies, and decorating the tree together. It was smaller than what Charlotte probably had in her house, but it was theirs, covered in ornaments Sophie had made over the years, and a few new ones Tom had let her pick out. "This is the best tree we've ever had," Sophie declared, hanging a felt snowman on a lower branch. "You say that every year." "Because it's true every year. Each tree is better than the last." Tom smiled, hanging a silver star near the top. "That's a good way to look at life, kiddo. Always getting better." "Is our life getting better?" Sophie asked, her tone more serious. Tom sat on the couch and Sophie climbed up beside him. "What do you think?" "I think it is. We have the nice apartment now. You're happy with your job. I made new friends at the party." She leaned against him. "But sometimes I miss how it used to be. When it was just us and everything was simple." Tom wrapped an arm around her. "Change is scary, even good change. But you know what hasn't changed?" "What?" "Us. You and me. That's forever, Soph. No matter how big the apartment gets, or how many parties we go to, or how fancy my job becomes, we're a team." Sophie nodded against his chest. "The best team." They watched Elf for the 1,000th time, laughing at the same jokes, quoting lines they knew by heart. When Sophie started yawning, Tom sent her to brush her teeth and get into pajamas. He pulled out the presents he'd hidden in his closet: a telescope Sophie had been wanting, some books, a new winter coat because she'd outgrown last year's. His phone rang. Charlotte's name lit up the screen. "Hey," Tom answered. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Sorry to call so late. I just wanted to check in, see how your Christmas Eve was going." Tom glanced at the tree, the scattered wrapping paper and ribbon he'd been organizing. "Good. Quiet. You?" "Quiet too. Michael flew back to Denver this morning, so it's just me and enough leftover ham to feed a small army." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "The house feels empty." Tom heard what she wasn't saying, the loneliness behind the words, the admission that success and money couldn't fill certain voids. "You should come by tomorrow," Tom heard himself say before his brain could catch up. For Christmas. Nothing fancy, just us. But we always make too much food, and Sophie would love to see you. There was a pause, long enough that Tom started to regret the impulse. Then Charlotte said quietly, Are you sure? I don't want to intrude. You wouldn't be intruding. Come by around 2. We'll do dinner early so Sophie doesn't explode from anticipation. Another pause. Okay, thank you, Tom. I'd like that. They said goodnight, and Tom stood in his living room wondering what he'd just done. Inviting his boss to Christmas dinner seemed like the kind of boundary crossing that could complicate things. But Charlotte had looked so lost at her own party, so aware of everything she'd sacrificed. And it was Christmas. Nobody should be alone on Christmas. He finished wrapping presents and put them under the tree. Sophie appeared in the doorway, eyes half closed. I thought you were asleep, Tom said. Couldn't sleep. Too excited. She patted over and looked at the presents. How many did you get me? You'll find out tomorrow. Will Miss Charlotte come visit us for Christmas? Tom blinked. How did you know I invited her? I heard you talking on the phone. It's okay, Dad. I'm glad she's coming. She shouldn't be alone. Tom pulled Sophie into a hug. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just figuring it out, she yawned. Can we make the cinnamon rolls tomorrow for breakfast? The ones that take forever? Those are the best ones. Then yeah, we'll make them. Now go to sleep before Santa decides you're too much trouble. Sophie giggled and headed back to her room. Tom sat on the couch, looking at the tree with its mismatched ornaments and blinking lights, and felt something settle in his chest. This was enough. This moment, this life, this strange new chapter where he had a career he loved, and a daughter who was thriving, and maybe, possibly, a friend who needed them as much as they'd needed her a few months ago. Christmas morning arrived with Sophie's trademark enthusiasm. She burst into Tom's room at 6:30, already wearing her bathrobe and Santa hat. It's Christmas. Can we open presents? Is Charlotte coming? Can we make the cinnamon rolls now? Tom groaned, checking the clock. Soph, it's 6:30. Exactly. We're wasting daylight. He couldn't argue with that logic. They made the cinnamon rolls from scratch, Sophie helping with the rolling and cutting while Tom handled the finicky temperature requirements. By 8, the apartment smelled like sugar and cinnamon, and Sophie was vibrating with barely contained excitement. Okay, Tom said, carrying 2 plates to the living room. We can open presents while these cool. Sophie tore into hers with gleeful abandon. The telescope was a massive hit. She immediately set it up by the balcony window and started trying to spot birds in the park. The books disappeared into her room to be devoured later. The coat earned a distracted "Thanks, Dad," before she returned to the telescope. Tom opened his presents. Sophie had made him a pencil holder in art class, painted green with "World's Best Dad," written in her careful handwriting. It was simultaneously the most lopsided and most perfect thing he'd ever received. I love it, kiddo. I know you do. Sophie pressed her eye to the telescope. Oh, Dad, come look. I can see a cardinal. They spent the morning taking turns with the telescope, Sophie keeping a detailed log of every bird she spotted. Around noon, Tom started preparing dinner, turkey breast because neither of them liked dark meat, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls. Nothing fancy, but Sophie's favorite foods. At 2 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. Sophie ran to answer it, pulling the door open to reveal Charlotte standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine and a wrapped present. Merry Christmas, Sophie said, hugging Charlotte before she'd even stepped inside. Charlotte looked surprised but pleased, hugging her back. Merry Christmas, Sophie. She looked up at Tom. Hi. Come in, Tom said, suddenly aware of how small and ordinary his apartment must seem compared to Charlotte's house. Sorry about the mess. Sophie's been testing out her new telescope all morning. A telescope? That's wonderful. Charlotte handed him the wine and held out the present to Sophie. This is for you. I hope you like it. Sophie tore into it with characteristic enthusiasm. Inside was a beautiful leather journal with her name embossed on the cover, along with a set of colored pens. For recording your observations, Charlotte explained, every good scientist needs a proper notebook. Sophie's face lit up. This is so cool. Thank you. She ran to show Tom. Dad, look, it has my name and everything. That's beautiful, Soph. What do you say? Thank you, Charlotte. It's perfect. Sophie disappeared into her room to write her first entry, leaving Tom and Charlotte standing in the living room. Charlotte looked around, taking in the small tree, the modest furniture, the photos on the wall of Sophie at various ages. "Your home is lovely," she said. "It's small. It's warm. There's a difference." Charlotte removed her coat, and Tom hung it in the closet. "Something smells amazing. Turkey and all the fixings. Nothing fancy." "Fancy is overrated. This is—" She trailed off, her expression softening. "This is exactly what I needed." They settled into an easy rhythm. Charlotte helped set the table while Tom finished cooking. Sophie kept running out to share telescope discoveries and journal entries. When they sat down to eat, it felt natural, like they'd done this 100 times before instead of it being the first. "This is delicious," Charlotte said after her first bite. "Where did you learn to cook?" "Trial and error, mostly. When you're responsible for keeping an 8-year-old fed and healthy, you figure it out fast." Sophie nodded seriously. "Dad used to make really bad food. Remember the spaghetti incident?" Tom groaned. "We don't talk about the spaghetti incident." "What happened?" Charlotte asked, clearly amused. "He forgot to put water in the pot," Sophie said. "The noodles turned into basically charcoal and the smoke alarm went off. Mrs. Chen from downstairs, this was our old apartment, came running up thinking the building was on fire." Charlotte laughed, a real laugh that made her whole face light up. "I would have paid to see that." "It was a learning experience," Tom said dryly. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Charlotte asked Sophie about school, about her friends, about what she wanted to be when she grew up. "An astronaut," Sophie said confidently. "Or maybe a marine biologist or a teacher. I haven't decided yet." "You've got time," Charlotte said. "That's the nice thing about being 8. The whole world is still possible." "What did you want to be when you were 8?" Sophie asked. Charlotte thought about it. "A veterinarian. I was obsessed with animals, had a whole collection of stuffed dogs and cats. I made my parents set up a pretend animal hospital in the garage." "What changed?" "Life, I guess. My father needed help with the business, and I was good at numbers and strategy, so that's what I became." "Do you regret it?" The question came from Tom, surprising himself. Charlotte met his eyes. "Sometimes. Not the company itself. I love what we've built. But the cost of it? Yeah. Sometimes I regret that." The honesty hung in the air for a moment before Sophie, oblivious to the weight of it, said, "Well, it's good you run the company because otherwise Dad wouldn't have a job and we'd still be in the tiny apartment." Charlotte smiled. "Then I'm glad too." After dinner, they moved to the living room. Sophie demonstrated her telescope, showing Charlotte how to adjust the focus and find the cardinal nest she'd been tracking. Tom cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drifting from the other room, Sophie's excited chatter and Charlotte's warm responses. When he returned, Sophie was showing Charlotte her journal, pointing out the detailed drawings she'd already started making of different birds. "You're quite the artist," Charlotte said. "These are really good, Sophie." "Dad says I get it from my mom. She used to draw too." Tom tensed slightly, but Charlotte handled it with grace. "She must have been very talented, just like you." They played board games until Sophie started yawning. At 7, Tom announced it was bedtime, earning the expected protests. "But Charlotte's still here." "And Charlotte probably needs to get home," Tom said. "Say goodnight." Sophie hugged Charlotte tightly. "Thank you for spending Christmas with us. This was the best Christmas ever." Charlotte's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you for having me, sweetheart. It was my best Christmas too." After Sophie went to bed, after the ritual of teeth brushing and story reading and one more hug, Tom returned to find Charlotte still on the couch, looking at Sophie's journal. "She's special," Charlotte said softly. "You've done an incredible job raising her." Tom sat in the chair across from her. "I'm trying. Some days are better than others." "That's parenting. That's life." Charlotte set down the journal carefully. "Tom, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever feel like you're living 2 separate lives? Like the person you are at work and the person you are at home are completely different?" Tom considered this. "Used to, when I was in the military especially. But now, I don't know. I think they're merging more. Sophie knows what I do. She's proud of it. And the work feels connected to who I am, not separate from it." "I envy that. Integration. Charlotte stood, walking to the window that looked out over the park. I've kept everything compartmentalized for so long. Work Charlotte, personal Charlotte, the Charlotte I show the board versus the one I show my brother. It's exhausting maintaining all those versions. Tom joined her at the window. So stop. Just be one Charlotte. It's not that simple. Why not? She turned to face him. Because being vulnerable in my position is dangerous. Showing weakness invites challenges. If the board sees me as anything other than completely in control, they'll look for ways to push me out. It's happened before, to other CEOs, especially women. That's work. What about the rest of your life? What rest of my life? Charlotte's laugh was bitter. Work is my life, Tom. It has been for 18 years. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Tom understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. He'd felt the same way after leaving the Marines, like his entire identity had been stripped away and he had to build a new one from scratch. But he'd had Sophie to force him into it, to give him a reason to become someone beyond a soldier. It's never too late to change, he said, to build something new. Is that what you did? After Sophie's mother died? I didn't have a choice, but yeah, I had to become a different person. Someone who could be both mom and dad, who could handle tantrums and homework, and teaching a little girl how to be brave even when I was terrified. He looked at Charlotte directly. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you for today, for letting me be part of this. I know it probably complicated things, me being your boss and coming here." "Are you Sophie's boss?" Tom asked. "What? No, of course not." "Then you were here as Sophie's guest. That's how she sees it. And honestly, that's how I'm choosing to see it too." Something shifted in Charlotte's expression, a wall coming down. "You're a good man, Tom Harris." "I'm just a dad trying to do right by his kid." "That makes you a good man." They stood at the window a while longer, watching the park lights flicker in the darkness. Then Charlotte collected her coat and prepared to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Would it be okay if I did this again sometime? Not Christmas specifically, but spending time with you and Sophie, outside of work." Tom felt that familiar wariness, the sense that he was stepping into territory he didn't fully understand. But he thought about Sophie's face when Charlotte had arrived, the way she'd lit up. He thought about how natural it had felt, having Charlotte here. How right. "Yeah," he said, "that would be okay." Charlotte smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, Tom saw her completely relaxed. "Good. Merry Christmas, Tom." "Merry Christmas, Charlotte." He watched her walk down the hall to the elevator, waited until the doors closed behind her. Then he went back inside, turned off the tree lights, and checked on Sophie one more time. She was fast asleep, the journal on her nightstand, the telescope still pointed at the window. Tom stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, and felt the weight of the day settle on him. Something had shifted today, something he couldn't quite name. A boundary had been crossed, or maybe just acknowledged. Charlotte wasn't just his boss anymore. She was becoming something else, a friend, maybe. Or something more complicated. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. But as he got ready for bed, Tom's phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "Thank you again for today. You and Sophie gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Sleep well." Tom typed back, "You gave us something too. Good night, Charlotte." He fell asleep wondering what exactly they'd all found in each other, and whether it was something that could last beyond the holidays, beyond the clean boundaries of boss and employee, beyond the safe distance they'd maintained until now. The answer, he suspected, would reveal itself soon enough. January arrived with the kind of cold that made Tom grateful for the truck's working heater and Sophie's new winter coat. The holidays had passed in a blur of normalcy. New Year's Eve spent at home with sparkling cider and a countdown Sophie barely made it to. The first week back at school, marked by Sophie's enthusiastic reports about classmates' vacation adventures. Work resumed its steady rhythm, but something had fundamentally shifted in the dynamic between Tom and Charlotte. She texted more often now, not just about work. Photos of interesting birds she'd spotted in her yard, knowing Sophie would want to see them. Articles about telescope technology. Once, a picture of her attempting to make cinnamon rolls with the caption, "Harder than it looks. Instructions unclear. Kitchen on fire. Send help." Tom had laughed out loud in his office, then typed back, "You forgot the water, didn't you?" "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." The texts were harmless, friendly, exactly what colleagues turned friends might exchange. But Tom noticed the way his heart rate picked up when her name appeared on his screen. He noticed how Sophie's first question after school was often, "Did you see Charlotte today?" He noticed that he'd started thinking about Charlotte at random moments, wondering what she'd think about a new security protocol, or whether she'd find a particular news story interesting, or if she was eating lunch alone again at her desk. It was dangerous territory, and Tom knew it. She was his boss. Getting involved, even just as friends, especially as friends, meant risking the stability he'd built for Sophie. But every time he resolved to maintain professional distance, Charlotte would do something that made it impossible. Like the morning she showed up at his office with coffee and a breakfast sandwich because, "You mentioned skipping breakfast and that's not acceptable." Or the afternoon she asked his opinion on a major company decision, then actually listened and implemented his suggestions. Or the evening she called, voice strained, and asked if he had time to talk about something that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with her father's death anniversary and how she couldn't seem to make it through the day without falling apart. Tom had listened for an hour while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table, offering no solutions because there weren't any, just presence and understanding. When Charlotte finally said goodnight, her voice was steadier, and Tom felt the weight of what it meant that she'd trusted him with that vulnerability. "Was that Charlotte?" Sophie asked after he hung up. "Yeah." "She sounded sad." "She was. Today's a hard day for her." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, "We should do something nice for her." "Like what?" "I don't know, something to make her smile." The next day, Sophie spent the afternoon making another card. This one with drawings of all the birds Charlotte had sent photos of, along with a message. "These are the birds that remind me of you because you help us see beautiful things. Love, Sophie." Tom had added his own note. "You're not alone. We're here when you need us." Charlotte's response came hours later. "I'm crying at my desk and Amanda thinks something terrible happened. Thank you both. This means everything." February brought Valentine's Day, a holiday Tom had successfully ignored for the past 6 years. But Sophie's teacher assigned a project. Students had to make Valentines for everyone in class, no exceptions. Which meant Tom spent an evening at the kitchen table cutting out construction paper hearts while Sophie carefully wrote each classmate's name. "Are you making Valentines for anyone?" Sophie asked, glitter glue somehow ending up in her hair despite Tom's vigilance. "No, Soph, that's a kid thing. Adults do it too. I saw commercials." "Those are for married people or people who are dating." Sophie gave him a look that was far too knowing for 8 years old. "You should make one for Charlotte." Tom nearly cut his thumb with the scissors. "What? Why?" "Because she's your friend, and Valentine's Day is about showing people you care about them. That's what Mrs. Patterson said." "That's not quite," Tom started, then stopped. How did you explain to an 8-year-old the complex social rules around Valentine's Day? "It's complicated." "No, it's not. You either care about someone or you don't. You care about Charlotte, so you should tell her." The logic was flawless and terrifying. Tom changed the subject, but Sophie's words stayed with him. By Valentine's Day, he'd convinced himself it was a stupid idea. Then Charlotte texted him that morning. "Happy Valentine's Day. Hope you and Sophie have a great day. I'm drowning in chocolate that well-meaning employees keep leaving on my desk. Send help or insulin." Tom smiled, typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally settled on, "Happy Valentine's Day to you too. Sophie made you something but insists on giving it to you in person. Fair warning. I'm intrigued and slightly terrified. Can't wait." That evening, Tom picked Sophie up from school and drove to the office. Charlotte had said she'd be working late on quarterly reports. They found her exactly where Tom expected, at her desk, surrounded by spreadsheets, looking exhausted but focused. "Knock, knock," Tom said from the doorway. Charlotte looked up, surprise giving way to delight. "Tom, Sophie, what are you doing here?" Sophie marched in with a pink envelope. "I made you a Valentine because Dad said you were working late and everyone deserves a Valentine on Valentine's Day." Charlotte accepted the envelope with reverence, opening it carefully. Inside was a card with a drawing of 3 stick figures, One tall, one small, one medium, with long hair and a smile. The words, "Happy Valentine's Day to our favorite person," were written in Sophie's careful handwriting. Charlotte pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes bright. "Sophie, this is the most beautiful Valentine I've ever received." "Really? Really?" Charlotte stood and hugged Sophie. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm going to keep this in my office forever." "On your desk where everyone can see it?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Right on my desk where everyone can see it," Charlotte confirmed. They stayed for a few minutes, Sophie chattering about the Valentine's party at school, while Charlotte listened with genuine interest. When Tom finally said they needed to go, Charlotte walked them to the elevator. "Thank you for this," she said quietly to Tom while Sophie was distracted by the floor buttons. "I was having a rough day." "Rough how?" "The kind where you wonder if any of it matters. The reports, the metrics, the endless meetings. Days like today, I can't remember why I'm doing any of this." Tom understood that feeling. "You're doing it because 200 stores full of employees depend on you, because you're building something bigger than yourself, and because you're really good at it. That's very diplomatic." "I'm not being diplomatic. I'm being honest." Tom met her eyes. "You've changed thousands of lives, Charlotte, including mine. That matters." The elevator dinged, Sophie bounded in, and Tom followed. As the doors started to close, Charlotte called out, "Tom!" He caught the door. "Yeah?" "Would you and Sophie want to come to dinner Saturday? My place. I'll actually cook this time instead of catering." Tom hesitated for only a second. "We'd like that." Charlotte smiled, that real smile that transformed her face. "Good. 7 okay?" "Perfect." The doors closed, and Sophie immediately said, "Are you and Charlotte dating?" Tom choked on nothing. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because you look at her the way people look at each other in movies, the ones where they kiss at the end." "We're friends, Soph, just friends." "Okay," Sophie said in a tone that clearly meant she didn't believe him, but would let it go for now. Tom spent the drive home wondering if Sophie saw something he'd been trying not to acknowledge. Yes, he cared about Charlotte. Yes, he thought about her more than was probably appropriate. Yes, when she smiled at him a certain way, his heart did something complicated in his chest. But acting on any of that was impossible. She was his boss. The power dynamic alone made it inappropriate, never mind the risk to his career and Sophie's stability. Saturday arrived too quickly and not fast enough. Tom changed shirts 3 times before settling on a dark blue button-down that Sophie approved of. Sophie wore her yellow dress, the one she'd worn to the holiday party, because Charlotte likes this one. "How do you know Charlotte likes it?" Tom asked, locking the apartment door. "Because she told me. She said yellow is a happy color, and I should wear it more often." Charlotte's house looked different in the evening light, warmer, more inviting. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose, looking more relaxed than Tom had ever seen her at work. "Come in. Fair warning. I attempted to cook, and it's only slightly burnt." The kitchen smelled amazing despite Charlotte's modest claim. She'd made lasagna, salad, and garlic bread. The table was set with actual cloth napkins, and there were candles that Charlotte quickly clarified were just for ambiance, not because this is romantic or anything. Dinner was easy, comfortable. They talked about everything and nothing, Sophie's upcoming science fair project, a security incident Tom had handled that week, Charlotte's ongoing battle with her board over expansion plans. It felt natural, like they'd done this dozens of times. After dinner, Charlotte brought out a board game that turned competitive fast. Sophie won the first round, Tom the second, and Charlotte the tiebreaker with a move that had Tom accusing her of cheating. "I did not cheat. I'm just exceptionally good at strategy." "You're exceptionally good at distracting your opponents with small talk so they don't notice you're building a monopoly." Charlotte grinned. "That's not cheating. That's tactical excellence." By 9, Sophie was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired. Tom scooped her up, and she was asleep before they made it to the front door. "She's out," Tom whispered. Charlotte smiled softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from Sophie's face. "She's wonderful, Tom. You know that, right? You're raising an incredible human being." "I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm fumbling through it." "That's how you know you're doing it right. The parents who think they have it all figured out are the ones who mess up." Tom shifted Sophie's weight, and she mumbled something incoherent, burrowing into his shoulder. I should get her home. Wait. Charlotte disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a container. Leftover lasagna for lunch tomorrow. You don't have to eat. I know. I want to. She walked them to the door, and something in the way she stood there, backlit by her living room lights, made Tom's breath catch. She looked beautiful and lonely and hopeful all at once. Charlotte, he started, not sure what he was going to say. I know, she said quietly. Whatever you're about to say about how this complicates things or crosses lines or isn't appropriate, I know. But I don't care. I haven't felt this present in years. Like I'm actually living my life instead of just managing it. And that's because of you. Both of you. Tom swallowed hard. I feel it too. But we have to be careful. My job, Sophie's stability. I would never do anything to jeopardize either of those things. You have to know that. I do. But people talk. If anyone at the company thought there was something between us... Is there? Charlotte asked. Something between us? The question hung in the air, impossible to answer without changing everything. Tom looked down at Sophie sleeping in his arms, thought about all they'd built, all they had to lose. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe, but I can't figure that out right now, not when so much depends on getting it right. Charlotte nodded, disappointment flickering across her face before she hit it. You're right. Of course you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize. Just give me time to think. Take all the time you need. Charlotte opened the door. And drive safe. Tom carried Sophie to the truck, buckled her in, and drove home with his mind spinning. He knew what he wanted. Had known for weeks, maybe longer. He wanted to see where this thing with Charlotte could go, wanted to explore the connection that had been building since that morning in the grocery store. But wanting something didn't make it wise. At home, he tucked Sophie into bed and stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her sleep. She'd been through so much loss already. Her mother, the instability of those early years, the constant moves and uncertainty. She was finally thriving, finally happy and secure. Was Tom willing to risk that for a relationship that might not work out? His phone buzzed, a text from Charlotte. I'm sorry if I made things awkward. I value your friendship too much to lose it over my inability to keep my feelings to myself. Can we forget I said anything? Tom stared at the message, then typed, Nothing to forget. And for the record, you didn't say anything I haven't been thinking myself, but we both need to be smart about this. Agreed. Good night, Tom. Good night, Charlotte. The following weeks were a careful dance of maintained boundaries and unspoken tension. They kept their interactions professional at work, never meeting alone unless it was clearly business-related. But the texts continued, the small moments of connection that neither of them seemed willing to give up. In March, Sophie's science fair project consumed their lives. She'd decided to track bird migration patterns using her telescope and journal, correlating her observations with data from ornithology websites. It was ambitious for a third grader, but Sophie approached it with characteristic determination. Dad, I need to present this to someone who isn't you, Sophie announced one evening. Mrs. Patterson says practicing with a real audience helps. What about Mrs. Chen? I already practiced with her twice. I need someone new. Tom knew where this was going. You want to practice with Charlotte. She'd be perfect. She likes science and birds, and she's really smart. Tom couldn't argue with that logic. He texted Charlotte, expecting a polite excuse. Instead, she responded immediately. I would be honored. When and where? They arranged for Charlotte to come to the apartment on Thursday evening. Sophie prepared like she was presenting to the Nobel Committee, arranging her poster board, organizing her data, practicing her speech until Tom could recite it from memory. Charlotte arrived exactly on time, bringing flowers for their table because presentations deserve ambiance, and a bag of fancy chocolates for post-presentation celebration. Sophie led her through the project with impressive confidence, explaining migration routes and seasonal patterns, and how temperature affected bird behavior. Charlotte asked thoughtful questions, praised specific details, and offered gentle suggestions that Sophie eagerly incorporated. You're going to win this science fair, Charlotte said when Sophie finished. That was professional level work. Sophie beamed. Really? Really? I'm so impressed, Sophie. You should be very proud. After Sophie went to bed, buzzing with confidence and chocolate, Charlotte lingered. She and Tom stood in the kitchen, the comfortable silence between them charged with everything they weren't saying. She's going to do great, Charlotte said. You've raised a scientist. I've raised a kid who asks too many questions and never accepts because I said so as an answer. That's what scientists do. Charlotte smiled. Tom, can I ask you something? Sure. When you think about the future, what do you see? The question was loaded, and they both knew it. Tom chose his words carefully. I see Sophie growing up. I see myself continuing to build something meaningful at work. I see stability, security, happiness, things I didn't think were possible a year ago. And is there room in that future for... Charlotte trailed off. For what? For me. For this. Whatever this is between us. Or am I kidding myself that there's something here worth exploring? Tom's heart hammered. You're not kidding yourself. There's something here. I feel it every time I see you, every time you text, every time Sophie talks about you like your family. But Charlotte, I'm terrified of screwing this up, of hurting Sophie if things don't work out, of losing my job if the company decides we've crossed too many lines. So we do nothing? Just ignore what we both feel because it's complicated? I don't know. Maybe. For now. Tom ran a hand through his hair. I'm not saying never. I'm saying not yet. Not until I figure out how to do this without risking everything. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I can respect that. But Tom? Don't wait too long. Life's too short to let fear make all your decisions. She left, and Tom stood in his kitchen wondering if he was being wise or just a coward. The science fair was a triumph. Sophie won second place in her grade category, narrowly beaten by a sixth grader's volcano that actually erupted. She was thrilled with her ribbon and the judges' comments about her exceptional data collection and analysis. Charlotte had sent flowers to the school with a card. Congratulations, scientist Sophie. So proud of you. Love, Charlotte. The word love hadn't escaped Tom's notice. Neither had Sophie's response. Can we invite Charlotte to my celebration dinner? They went to Sophie's favorite pizza place, a family-owned joint with red checkered tablecloths and a jukebox that played oldies. Charlotte fit right in, laughing at Sophie's animated retelling of the judges' questions and challenging her to a friendly debate about whether birds were actually descended from dinosaurs. Watching them together, Sophie gesturing wildly while Charlotte listened with genuine fascination, Tom felt something shift inside him. This was what family looked like. Not the traditional configuration he'd once imagined, but something real and right and full of possibility. After dinner, they walked through the park near Tom's apartment. Sophie ran ahead, chasing a dog whose owner had stopped to chat with another parent. Tom and Charlotte walked in comfortable silence, hands almost but not quite touching. She's happy, Charlotte said softly. Really, truly happy. She is. Are you? Tom looked at Charlotte, at the woman who'd given him a second chance, who'd become part of their lives so seamlessly he couldn't remember what it felt like before she was there. Yeah, I am. Are you? Getting there. Charlotte smiled. For a long time, I thought happiness meant achieving the next goal, hitting the next milestone, proving I was good enough to fill my father's shoes. But lately, I've realized happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you choose. Moments you decide to be present for. Like this one? Exactly like this one. Sophie came running back, breathless and grinning. Dad! Charlotte! There's a concert in the park next Saturday. Can we go? Please? Tom glanced at Charlotte, who nodded. I'm in if you are. Then yeah, Soph, we can go. Sophie cheered, then grabbed both their hands, swinging between them as they continued walking. Tom felt Charlotte's fingers tighten around his, just for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of everything they were building. The concert was a local band playing covers in the park's amphitheater. Families spread blankets on the grass. Kids ran around with glow sticks. Food trucks lined the perimeter selling everything from tacos to ice cream. It was wholesome and perfect, and exactly the kind of evening Tom had dreamed about when he'd imagined what a good life for Sophie might look like. They claimed a spot near the front, spreading out a blanket Charlotte had brought. Sophie danced unselfconsciously to the music, dragging Charlotte up to dance with her. Tom watched them, his boss and his daughter, laughing and spinning in the fading daylight, and felt his carefully maintained walls crumble. When they finally collapsed back onto the blanket, breathless and happy, Sophie announced she was starving. Tom handed her money for the food trucks, watching her run off with strict instructions to stay where he could see her. Alone with Charlotte for the first time all evening, Tom felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on him.
"I've been thinking about what you asked," he said, "about the future and whether there's room for you in it."
Charlotte went very still. And I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting fear decide what I do and don't get to have. Tom turned to face her fully. I don't know how to do this. Navigate a relationship with my boss, figure out what it means for my career, explain it to Sophie or to the company or to anyone else who might have opinions. But I know I want to try, if you're willing to figure it out with me. Charlotte's face transformed, hope and joy and relief washing over her features. Are you sure? Because once we start down this road, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything except Sophie. What about Sophie? Have you talked to her? Not yet, but I will. And honestly, I think she's been waiting for me to catch up. Charlotte laughed, the sound bright and free. She's a smart kid. She gets that from her mom. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sophie navigate the crowd with her taco. The band launched into a slow song, couples pairing off to sway together. We should probably wait to tell people at work, Tom said. Give ourselves time to figure out what this is before dealing with office politics. Agreed, though eventually we'll need to disclose it to HR. Make sure everything's above board. We will. But for now, can we just be? Without worrying about all the logistics? Charlotte reached out and took his hand, threading their fingers together. Yeah, we can do that. Sophie returned with her taco and immediately noticed their joined hands. She looked from Tom to Charlotte and back again, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Finally, she muttered, sitting down and taking a huge bite of her taco. Tom and Charlotte exchanged glances, then burst out laughing. How long have you been waiting for finally? Tom asked. Since Christmas, Sophie said matter-of-factly. You've been making googly eyes at each other for months. It was exhausting. Googly eyes? Charlotte repeated, delighted. Big-time googly eyes, Sophie confirmed. Mrs. Chen noticed too. We had a whole conversation about it. Tom groaned. Oh God, what did Mrs. Chen say? That you both deserve to be happy and I should be patient while you figured it out. Sophie finished her taco and curled up against Tom's side. So, does this mean Charlotte's your girlfriend now? Tom looked at Charlotte, raising an eyebrow in question. She smiled and nodded. Yeah, Soph, Charlotte's my girlfriend. Cool, can we get ice cream now? They got ice cream, the three of them walking through the park as the concert wound down and stars began appearing overhead. Sophie walked between them, holding both their hands, chattering about school and birds, and whether they could get a telescope for the balcony that was even bigger than her current one. Later, after they dropped Charlotte at her car with promises to see her tomorrow, Sophie fell asleep on the drive home. Tom carried her upstairs, tucked her in, and stood in her doorway feeling like his life had just shifted on its axis again. His phone buzzed. Charlotte, thank you for taking a chance on us. I promise I'll make it worth it. Tom smiled, typing back. You already have. Good night, Charlotte. Good night, Tom. Sweet dreams. The next months unfolded with the kind of happiness Tom had forgotten was possible. They were careful at work, maintaining professional boundaries, never meeting behind closed doors unless others were present. But outside the office, they built something real. Charlotte became a fixture in their lives, joining them for weekend breakfasts, helping Sophie with homework, teaching them both to cook things more complicated than pasta and grilled cheese. Sophie thrived with Charlotte's attention, blooming under the influence of another strong woman in her life. They went to museums, parks, the zoo. Charlotte taught Sophie about business, letting her help with simple reports, explaining how companies worked in terms an 8-year-old could understand. Sophie taught Charlotte about joy, about finding magic in everyday moments, about laughing without restraint, about loving without fear. Tom watched them together and felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known it could. This wasn't replacing Sophie's mother. Nothing could do that. But it was building something new,
something that honored the past while embracing the future. In May, the company held its annual shareholders meeting. Charlotte had to present the year's results, and she was nervous in a way Tom had never seen her. The night before, she came to their apartment and rehearsed her speech while Sophie offered feedback. "You sound too serious," Sophie said after the third run-through. "Like you're apologizing for doing a good job." Charlotte blinked. "I do? Yeah, you should sound proud. You made the company better. That's awesome." Charlotte looked at Tom, who shrugged. "She's not wrong. You've increased revenue, improved employee satisfaction, cut incident rates across the board. Those aren't things to apologize for." "The board's been critical lately, about expansion costs, about things that are investments in the future," Tom interrupted. "Stop letting them make you defensive. You're the CEO. Act like it." Charlotte squared her shoulders, something shifting in her posture. She ran through the speech again, this time with confidence and conviction. When she finished, Sophie applauded. "Perfect. You're going to crush it." The next day, Tom watched the live stream from his office as Charlotte addressed the shareholders. She was magnificent, commanding, articulate, unapologetic about the choices she'd made. When the board member who'd been most critical tried to challenge her, she responded with data and logic that left him speechless. Tom felt pride swell in his chest. This was the woman he'd fallen for, strong, brilliant, capable of handling anything thrown at her. That evening, Charlotte called him from her car. "Did you watch? Every minute. You were incredible. I channeled Sophie's advice, stopped apologizing for being good at my job." Tom laughed. "She's wise beyond her years." "She is. Tom, I love you." The words hung in the air. They hadn't said it yet, had been dancing around it for months. But hearing it now, in Charlotte's voice, steady and sure and unafraid, Tom felt something unlock inside him. "I love you too," he said. "I have for a while." "How long?" Tom thought back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment. "Christmas, maybe? When you sat in my apartment and let yourself just be human instead of perfect. That's when I knew." "That long?" Charlotte's voice was soft with wonder. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was scared. Because it felt too good to be true. Because I'm an idiot who almost let fear keep me from the best thing that's happened to me since Sophie." "You're not an idiot. You're careful. It's one of the things I love about you." They talked until Charlotte pulled into her driveway, making plans for the weekend. When Tom hung up, he found Sophie standing in the doorway, grinning. "You love her," Sophie said. "Yeah, kiddo, I do." "Good. Me too." In June, Charlotte suggested they take a vacation together, a real one, somewhere none of them had been. They settled on a beach town 3 hours away, renting a small house for a week. It would be their first extended time together, a test of whether what they had could survive proximity and domesticity. The week was perfect in its imperfection. They got sunburned the first day because nobody remembered to reapply sunscreen. Sophie got stung by a jellyfish and cried for an hour. Tom and Charlotte had their first real fight about something stupid, whether to eat out or cook in, and learned how to apologize and compromise. But there were also morning walks on the beach, Sophie collecting shells while Tom and Charlotte talked about everything and nothing. There were afternoon naps in the hammock, the three of them piled together like puppies. There were sunset dinners where they laughed until their stomachs hurt, and quiet evenings where they just existed in each other's space. On the last night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Tom and Charlotte sat on the porch, listening to the waves. "I want this," Charlotte said quietly. "Not just the vacation, all of it. The everyday stuff, the boring domestic life I thought I'd never have." "It's not too late," Tom said. "I'm 43, Tom. If we're talking about marriage, kids, are we talking about that?" Charlotte looked at him, vulnerable and hopeful. "I don't know. Are we?" Tom thought about it, about what it would mean to get married, to fully join their lives, to give Sophie the family she deserved and Charlotte the home she'd been missing. It was fast, maybe too fast by conventional standards, but nothing about their relationship had been conventional from the start. "Yeah," he said, "I think we are." Charlotte's breath caught. "Really?" "Really. Not tomorrow, not next month, but eventually, yeah. I want to marry you, Charlotte. I want Sophie to have you as a permanent fixture in her life.
I want us to be a family, officially." Charlotte kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. "I want that too, so much." They sat together under the stars, planning a future that felt impossible and inevitable all at once. By the time they went inside, Tom felt like everything in his life had finally clicked into place. The job, the apartment, Sophie's happiness, and now this. Love had found him when he wasn't looking, had transformed his world in ways he never could have anticipated. The robbery that had started it all felt like a lifetime ago. That morning in the grocery store when he'd tackled a gunman to protect a stranger, he'd just been doing what felt right, what his training had demanded, what his conscience required. He'd never imagined that split-second decision would lead here, to a career he loved, a home that felt safe, a daughter who was thriving, and a woman who saw him completely and loved him anyway. As Tom fell asleep that night, Charlotte's hand in his, Sophie's soft breathing audible through the wall, he thought about how one moment of courage could change everything, how protecting someone could mean being protected in return, how saving a life could save your own in ways you never saw coming. He'd gone into that store looking for milk and cereal. He'd walked out having found something infinitely more valuable, a future he never knew he was searching for, and a love he never expected but would spend the rest of his life grateful for. Sometimes, Tom thought as sleep claimed him, heroes don't save the day for glory or recognition. Sometimes they just save the right person at the right time, and that simple act of courage becomes the foundation for everything beautiful that follows.